I was standing beside my mother's casket when my grandmother leaned close and whispered something that made my entire body go cold, saying, "She wasn't supposed to be your mother." And I turned to her so fast I nearly lost my balance as I tried to process what she had just said, asking, What does that even mean?" in a shaking voice, but she didn't answer and instead just patted my hand like she had said something completely normal before walking away to greet another guest, leaving me standing there frozen while staring at my mom's lifeless face and trying to convince myself that I must have misheard her, even though deep down I already knew that I didn't. My older brother Ethan noticed my expression and walked over, asking me what happened, and I swallowed hard before telling him that Grandma had just said that Mom wasn't supposed to be my mother, and he didn't look surprised at all, which is exactly when my stomach dropped and I whispered, "You knew?" as he hesitated for a moment before gently grabbing my arm and guiding me outside, away from the crowd, away from the whispers and fake condolences, quietly saying, "Not here," as we stepped into the cold air where the sounds of the funeral slowly faded behind us. I looked at him, barely holding myself together, and said, "Ethan, tell me what's going on," and he ran a hand through his hair as if he was struggling with something heavy before finally saying that before Mom, Dad was married, and I immediately blinked in disbelief and said that it wasn't possible because Dad had always told us that Mom was his first and only, but Ethan cut me off and said she wasn't, telling me her name was Lillian, a name that felt unfamiliar and yet somehow heavy at the same time, as he continued explaining that they had been married for 5 years and couldn't have kids, which completely destroyed them, especially her. I frowned and asked what that had to do with me, and Ethan looked straight into my eyes before saying that Lillian got pregnant once, which made my heart skip, but then he added softly that she lost the baby, and after that, things between them completely fell apart, and I exhaled slowly while trying to piece everything together before asking if Dad met Mom after the divorce, but Ethan shook his head and said no. He met Mom before the divorce, which made my chest tighten instantly as I said no, that couldn't be true, but then he told me that Mom was actually Lillian's best friend. Everything went silent in that moment as he explained that she used to come over all the time for family dinners and holidays and was always around, and while Lillian was falling apart, Mom and Dad started getting closer, which made me feel sick as I asked if he was saying that Mom had an affair with her best friend's husband, and even though Ethan didn't answer, he didn't have to because the silence said everything, and I stepped back with trembling hands while he quietly added that it wasn't even the worst part. I looked at him, almost afraid to hear what came next, and he told me that when Lillian found out, she confronted them, and there was a huge fight before she left that night completely devastated, and when I asked what happened to her, Ethan's voice dropped as he said, "She died in a car accident that same night," which made it feel like the ground disappeared beneath me as I kept repeating that it couldn't be real, but he continued by saying that people called it an accident, even though some believed she was too emotional to drive properly. Tears blurred my vision as I asked if Dad and Mom just moved on like nothing happened, and Ethan said they got married less than a year later, and that 2 years after that I was born, which made me shake my head and step back again because nothing made sense anymore. But then he stepped closer and said there was something else I needed to know, which made me freeze completely as I asked what it was, and after hesitating longer this time, he said that after Lillian's death her parents tried to get custody of something. My heart started pounding as I asked what, and Ethan looked at me in a way I couldn't understand before saying, "A frozen embryo," which instantly made my breath catch as he explained that Lillian had gone through IVF before everything happened, and there was one embryo left that belonged to her and Dad, and I felt like I couldn't breathe anymore when he added that it disappeared from the clinic records, making me stare at him in disbelief as I tried to form the question, but before I could finish, he quietly said that Mom worked at that clinic. Everything inside me shattered at that moment as I begged him to stop, but he continued and said that Mom used it, that she had it implanted and told Dad it was a miracle pregnancy, and I couldn't even feel my hands anymore as I whispered that it meant I wasn't Mom's biological daughter, and Ethan slowly shook his head and said that I was Lillian's. The world around me started to feel distant and unreal. The funeral, the people, the voices, none of it mattered anymore as I whispered that my whole life had been built on a lie, while tears streamed down my face, and Ethan didn't say anything as he just stood there and let the truth sink in, and after a few moments I wiped my tears